Prince Leopold of Cöthen was a very fortunate man. At the age of 23, he had acquired the best Kapellmeister available, the 32-year-old Johann Sebastian Bach. Prince Leopold could play the violin and the harpsichord, and he even studied the theory of music. He was no mere dilettante, and that must have pleased Bach. Bach was also delighted with the 17 musicians of the court, almost all of them excellent instrumentalists. From his pen fell very quickly many sonatas, partitas, French suites, English suites, sinfonias. Bach was clearly stimulated by this new environment. The prince was so proud of Bach that he took him on some of his travels, even on his annual trip to the Karlsbad spa. But it was during one such trip that Bach's wife fell ill. And before he could get back to her, Maria Barbara had died and had been buried.
We know that he grieved a lot. First, it must be so shocking. No telephones, he couldn't be warned of anything wrong, and he comes from a happy journey, comes back, and she's dead and interred. That's absolutely horrible. And then he didn't remarry soon at all, and he waited a long time, which must have been extremely difficult for him to do with his young children. I mean. And he remarried, and he was very careful in his choice of his second wife, and very lucky, I think. I think he must have had a wonderful relationship with his two wives. In fact, if I believed in reincarnation, I could easily persuade myself that I was one of them.
His first wife had borne him 7 children, of which 4 survived childhood. Anna Magdalena bore him 13 more. But more than that, she was a good companion. She was a person who appreciated her husband's genius. Anna Magdalena helped greatly in his later years to gather his works together, and it was to her that Bach dedicated more than one piece of music. While living in Cöthen, he decided to compose a book of music for his 10-year-old son, Wilhelm Friedemann. What came out of this was what we call today the Klavierbüchlein, or the little clavier book. Carl Philipp Emanuel said that his father was the first to make systematic use of the thumb, to raise it from its former idleness to the position of the principal finger. It is hard to imagine how many children since that time have learned fingering, harmony, and counterpoint from studying this work. When Bach decided to leave Cöthen and go to Leipzig, this must have been a very difficult decision for him to make. How did he arrive at that?
In Cöthen hatte Bach
When Bach had to decide whether to leave Cöthen and move to Leipzig, he had to ponder over many issues. During Bach's 5.5 years in Cöthen, the prince may have gradually lost interest in music. The prince's wife might have had something to do with that, since she cared little for the arts. More likely reasons were economic and political problems. Education posed another problem, especially for Bach's adolescent sons. Bach was tormented all his life by never having had higher education. Leipzig had a university, but the decision was not his to make.
I'm standing in a great hall which is in the Altes Rathaus, the old town hall of Leipzig. And it was in this room that the councillors met to decide who did they want to be the new cantor of Leipzig, the director of music, and the teacher at the Thomasschule. Their first choice was a logical one, Georg Philipp Telemann, one of the best-known musicians in Europe. So they invited him to come and be their new cantor. Telemann agreed, but then his employers in Hamburg were very alarmed and said, "We must have this man stay in Hamburg." And they offered him more money, and he said, "What can I do? I will have to stay in Hamburg." At that time, one of the councillors, Abraham Christoph Platz, was heard to say, This is no great loss. He would have been too much a Kapellmeister, too much a performer. We need a real teacher. They asked yet a second gentleman named Christoph Graupner, who was a favorite son from the Thomasschule. He also declined. And so they had to settle for Johann Sebastian Bach. Little did they realize they were getting a man who was primarily a composer, also a great performer, and who was willing to teach if given the proper students. It was this man Plotz who goes down in history with his infamous statement, "We had to settle for a mediocre man since the best men were not available." Now Johann Sebastian was taking a new wife to a new job in a new city. It can't have been an easy decision for him to make, and I'm sure he must have had some apprehensions about it, because he was leaving behind a city that he had loved, a prince that he had served well and that had been very, very supportive of him. He had had a lot of freedom to write whatever music came into his head. He had written a staggering amount of great instrumental music, and he had been appreciated by that prince too. But going to Leipzig, he knew that he was going to have the opportunity to work in a church setting once again, as he had before, and that he would have considerably more prestige, because this was a very important post. Being a cantor was still a higher step in the ladder than being just a Kapellmeister. As a cantor, he knew he would have other duties, not all of which were completely comfortable for him. He would have to teach a lot. I think that actually Bach loved teaching, but I'm not entirely sure that he always had students that were worthy of him. He was willing to teach, but he didn't want to take too much time away from the act of composing, which is what he really wanted to do. You see, from the time that Bach was a very young man, he had expressed the desire to write a great body of church music. And when Bach had a desire that was that strong, you knew that it was going to be fulfilled at some point in his life, and that Köthen, in a way, was just a way station on the fulfillment of that goal. Finally, Bach was going to be able to go to a great city and to a great church where parishioners hopefully would be able to appreciate the magnificent body of ecclesiastical music that he was about to give them. As Johann Sebastian Bach journeyed to his last station, the city of Leipzig, I wonder if he was at all concerned whether the people of this more cosmopolitan town would appreciate him and his art. I rather doubt it. I think he was so focused on what he was about to do, and he was so confident of his abilities, that I think he went forward with a happy heart, looking forward to all the new challenges that were about to present themselves, not least of which was the town council, to which he was directly responsible. You see, he was hired by the city, not by the church. As a member of this city, he was expected to serve in 4 different churches in the city of Leipzig. That was part of his duties. But he was looking forward to the opportunity to write a wonderful body of ecclesiastical music. I don't think that the town councilors had any idea what kind of magnificent musician they were about to have in their midst. And even while he was there, they had very little idea of how great the man really was. We're going to let you, in this 3rd segment of the Stations of Bach, hear some of his music uninterruptedly, so that you can appreciate the genius of this man through his own art without the necessary intercession of any words.